The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you are welcome to comment on my comments, whether you agree with me or not. And thanks to our friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio. We're syndicated coast to coast across the United States to 12 million additional households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten, and today is primary election day in Indiana and in North Carolina. And we thought it would be great to bring in an expert in how the news media are covering the election. Because in my opinion, and the opinion, I believe, of our guest, who will speak for himself in just a moment, the mainstream media is not doing as good a job as it could focusing on the issues. And in fact, we posed this question to you on the blog today, and there were a number of issues that many of you feel are being undercovered by the media and undercovered and discussed by the candidates. Among them, national health care, the stabilization of the economy, the United States' future relationships with other nations, how the various candidates, if elected president, would deal with Iran, how they would handle the Middle East, which many of you believe are being underreported and underdiscussed by the candidates. Well, I'm so delighted to have as our guest today former CNN correspondent Charles Feldman. Feldman is an investigative television and print journalist with many years of experience across all media platforms: television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and the internet. He was a New York and L.A. based CNN correspondent and has extensive experience in local New York area and Los Angeles television and radio. Feldman has written and or reported for publications such as New York Magazine, Parade, the New York Post, the New York Daily News, Playboy, Philadelphia Magazine, and the Catholic Digest. He was also a regular contributor to the Reuters News Service. He is the owner of a Beverly Hills, California-based media consulting company and has been an adjunct professor of journalism at the University of Southern California School of Journalism. Feldman is an expert in corporate and private media crisis management and has worked with lawyers, doctors, and CEOs across the United States. He is co-author of a nonfiction book about the media, No Time to Think: How 24-hour news hijacks our brains and puts us at risk. That's to be published this October. You can read his comments on the news and on the news media on his blog, thefeldmanblog.com. I'm going to post that in the room, and I urge you to read his blog as well as my own, of course. Feldmanblog.com. Charles Feldman, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for being with us. You know, as you could probably tell from the prelude to this program, there's been a lot of frustration expressed by many here on Paltalk, people who participate in News Talk Online, about the media's failure, in their opinion, to cut to the issues and let us know where the candidates really stand on policies, what they really would do if they were elected President of the United States. Do you share Charles Feldman in their frustration?
Yeah, I do. I think that when historians will look back on this, and not that many years into the future, by the way, I think that this is going to go down in the books as probably one of the worst covered by the mainstream media presidential elections we've had in American history. And of course, in early American history, you didn't have to deal with mass media, but certainly since television became a primary force in election coverage, in fact, the primary force in many ways in election coverage, I think that you can make a very strong argument, and in fact, I would make that argument, that this was the absolute worst, most silly coverage, and biased coverage in many ways, that I've ever seen, and I think that many in media, if they're being honest, would agree.
Tell us a little bit of some of the examples. Give us some examples, Charles Feldman, of what was silly in the coverage, and tell us what you view as biased in the coverage.
Well, I mean, the silly stuff is the horse race sort of coverage, which, is traditional, of course. But here you've got a race that is of historic proportions, certainly in the Democratic side. The first real possibility of a woman being elected president of the United States, the first possibility of an African American being elected president of the United States. And it took an enormously long amount of time for the press to really start zeroing in on those dimensions of it, because they pretended for a long time that gender was not an issue, that race was not an issue, and anyone with any kind of sense would realize that that was nonsense. It always was. The United States has many different problems, some resolved, some not resolved, but chief among them is that, there's a lot of problems that many men have with women who are authority figures, and sadly there are many white people who would have an argument, and you can see that in the voting patterns in many states, with electing an African American as president. So very early on, these issues needed to be explored with more seriousness, needed to be addressed more frequently, and I think that there was a sense on the part of the press to pull their punches. I think everybody was afraid that if they were too critical of a woman, they would be viewed as somehow being, anti-female, or if they were too critical of Barack Obama, that they would be viewed as being racist. And the press really took a very long time, too long, to get over that. You look at the now notorious debate, the one that unfortunately that ABC did, where Charlie Gibson took a lot of heat for that, some rightly so, and some probably that wasn't fair. But there was a perfect example where it took forever until they got around to real issues that are important to the American public. That's what I mean by silly coverage.